Welcome to the Fast Business Growth Made Easy podcast, the show for business owners and entrepreneurs who are ready to start playing bigger in your business. You'll discover shortcuts and strategies from experts across the globe to help you create a thriving business and life you love. Now, your host, Yoon Cannon.
Well, hello, everybody. Yoon Cannon here. Thanks so much for joining me today. Welcome to another episode of Ask Yoon. It's a Q&A episode where I tackle your questions on attracting more clients, boosting sales, building your team, productivity hacks, and more. So I am here to help you get unstuck. I want to see you start getting some quick wins in your business. So if you have a question that you would like to submit, I want to invite you to leave me a voice message right on my website. You can go to paramountbusinesscoach.com/ask-Yoon. So Yoon is spelled Y-O-O-N. So this week, we have a question from Morgan, who actually submitted it last week, and it was such a good question. It was 3 parts to it that I'm going to tackle part 2 and 3 today. So for those of you who didn't catch it last week, take a listen to her question.
Hi, Yoon. My name is Morgan Robinson with The Automated Therapist, automatedtherapist.com, and I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. My question is, what tips do you have for finding a solid virtual assistant, and how do you keep them accountable as well as build kind of a team morale if they live so far away and maybe you have multiple people on your team? And that's my question. Thank you.
Well, that was such a great question, and it had 3 parts to it. So I did address just part 1 last week. And for those of you who didn't catch that, I would say go listen to that episode, and that can be found at paramountbusinesscoach.com/how to find right virtual assistants. So today I'm excited to really dive into part 2 and 3 of your question, Morgan. And that's really about how to keep your virtual team accountable, and then how do you build team morale? So for those of you who have employees who work at your facility, the strategies I'm going to share really apply to both sets, but especially for the challenges that can arise from a team that's working virtually. So I've got so much I want to share with you today. In fact, there's 11 tips. It's not just one fell swoop item that you do in 10 minutes that's going to be the magic bullet. It's really being I can't talk today. It's really about being able to do a bunch of little things, right, that collectively really make a powerful impact in helping you keep them accountable and to build team morale. So you don't need to take notes if you're driving or running on your treadmill. I have put this all together in a neat little checklist. So if you stay till the end, I'll tell you where to get this free download. But now I just want you to listen to each of these 11 tips that's going to help you keep your team accountable. All right, so Morgan, the first area that you want to check is, do you have a written job description for each of your team members? So the first place in keeping them accountable really starts from the very beginning of their experience with you. So if the job description was vague, broad, and open-ended, it didn't have specific tasks, written underneath that, then you want to reevaluate that and make sure your job description is a lot tighter. Okay. And so that would be the first step. Now, the second spot I want you to take a look at is your employee handbook. Okay. So some of you with employees, you want to ask yourself, do you have an employee handbook? And if not, now's the time to just start putting some thoughts together on paper. It doesn't have to be this huge project. You can certainly hire consultants to, make this massive handbook for you, but that's not what I'm talking about. So for now, for the purposes of keeping your team accountable and building team morale, you want to have what their job description is written in the employee handbook, but also what your expectations are, of those team members. So for those of you with a virtual team, you might want to call it a team handbook, since usually a virtual team can be made up of a bunch of contractors or freelancers. So at any rate, you want to call it an employee handbook if they really are employees. whatever you call it, okay, have a handbook. So in this handbook, you can use this to welcome new team members, and you can utilize this as your onboarding strategy and be able to go over with them not only what their expectations are, but behaviors. You want to address those. And so that's the third point I want you to come away with is you want to have it written. And then as a part of your onboarding process, you want to review the written handbook. And I'm separating this as a third item because when I work with my private clients, a lot of times I see that some people have a handbook and then they don't review it, with their new people. They just hand it to them and say, here, read this, and sign it and get it back to us. So I want to tell you, it's important because really, most of the times, I'm telling you, I really don't think those folks are reading it. And so you want to go over the key items and review it with them to clarify anything that they may have questions on. So in the process of reviewing, you may very well find yourself, you may find them asking you questions that weren't really clarified in the handbook. So that's a good thing for you to go back and clarify that. Okay, so the third tip here is the onboarding review. The fourth tip I want to give you is, all right, so you got a job description that's written out. You've got their expectations built, okay, in the handbook as to what you do expect and negative behaviors as well as things like, how to get a raise. That usually motivates people, right? So the fourth tip is now that you just started them, and if you haven't done this with a new hire, you can do this now, even with your existing team. You want to sit down with them and do what I call a time management workflow calendar, okay? So part of keeping them accountable, I find when I troubleshoot this with my private clients and I really get into the weeds as far as why are your team members struggling in that area, half the times it's really due to the person's weakness, or challenge, I should say, with time management. And you know what? Let me re-clarify that. It doesn't necessarily always have to be their weakness in time management. It really can also be a combination of the employer's what's the word I want? Like high expectations, right? That you think they can jam 100 different objectives into one tiny little day. And the other part can certainly be their time management inefficiencies. So it doesn't matter either way, right? Just sitting down with each of your team members to do this time management workflow calendar process can really flesh out and make it clear for you, adjusting your expectations of what can really, what's achievable and possible in their workday, as well as theirs. Okay. So how do you do one? You just take a calendar, whether it's a hard written, like a print calendar, or whether it's online, but you take their work schedule. So if you're hiring them and their work schedule is 9 to 5, 8 to 3, or maybe it's just 4 hours a day, then you go through that and you match up what their objectives are, what you want them to be in charge of, and you estimate about how long it would take to be able to tackle those projects, and you plop it into the calendar. So, usually I would always recommend to batch, so if you are hiring someone to do it administrative, so maybe, Mondays might be invoice days, and depending on how many clients you have, perhaps it takes them 2 hours to do all the invoices, and maybe, Monday afternoon is, running all your reports and database. And so that could be a tedious thing that could take another 2 or 3 hours. So batch those projects into lumps of, okay, this is generally what we want to do as a routine on Monday mornings, or maybe you have the same routine every day. It's just blocked in maybe 15, 30, or 60-minute increments. So this is an important piece of holding them accountable if you guide them and help them to be able to organize and prioritize when would be the best time to tackle each of the job priorities that you have for them. Okay, so that would be the fourth thing for Morgan and our listeners to help you keep your team accountable, whether they're in person or virtual. Now, that's the fourth tip. The fifth tip is let's talk about also sitting down with your team member and doing what I call a personal goal setting coaching. Okay, and this is an important part, everybody, because it's key. It's one thing that you've got goals of what you would like to see that new team member. So let's give that person a name. So maybe her name is Jennifer. Okay, and so let's say if you're hiring Jennifer and you wanted her to be in charge of marketing and business development, right? But really, you also want to sit down with Jennifer and find out, well, what's her goals? Why is she in this role? Where does she see herself in a year, in 3 years, maybe even in 5 years? So you've got, generally two different types of people. One is the person who is highly motivated and wants the advancement opportunities and is eager to take on, higher level tasks and wants a leadership position and so forth. So that's great. Now, that's different, being able to design sort of a career track for them, even a career track within short-term milestones like 3 months, 6 month, 12-month goals. But then you have a different type of person who may just be so busy in their personal lives that really they just want an easy job where they can just show up to work. It's rather mindless and it's not high pressure. It's not high stress. They can just show up, do their work, and go home. And they're not interested in advancement. They just want a steady gig where they can feel a part of a team. And so that's important to be able to flesh that out and give them an opportunity to really be able to share with you, what motivates them, what are their personal goals. And so you've got to take a look at that. And that's another piece to, that it really impacts and affects your ability to hold your team accountable. Okay, so that's our fifth tip. Now, the sixth tip, that's also, I have this on that neat little checklist I'll share with you at the end where you can download that. So if you missed my message in the beginning, you don't have to take notes on all of these 11 tips. But the sixth tip is then you want to think about listing incentives. Okay, so if you're looking to build team morale, and if you're looking to, hold your team accountable, especially for the folks where you really want them to be able to go over and beyond, and you don't want to have to babysit. You want them to take the initiative and really hopefully exceed the goals that you've set for your business. So think about listing a bunch of different incentives that can perk them up, right? That they're not just going week in and week out feeling like it's the daily grind or the same old. You want to spark some fresh, new motivation, or excitement, something new for the week or the month or the quarter. And this is where you want to list all of your ideas on different incentives. And notice how I put this number 6, because much of the ideas of your incentives is going to come from what your team had shared with you was their personal goals. Okay. And so if someone is highly motivated and they're money motivated and they're telling you, hey, my goal is I really want to be able to, earn 30% more by this time next year. And so you're going to really focus on incentives that's going to be based on bonuses and commissions and so forth and so on. But if they're telling you, they're in this role because they just want to be a part of a team and that's their primary motivation, and their goal is to be able to, just work part-time with you while they're at home with their kids, then they are doing this to get out. And so maybe some of your incentives really can be built around building team camaraderie. Maybe it's a team dinner out that you're going to spring for if everybody hits the team goal. So you want to get your creative juices flowing and start jotting down a list of incentives. Maybe they're awards. People are sharing with you in their goal setting conversation that you're having with them, right? Perhaps they're sharing with you that they really want to, achieve and further their careers. So advancement opportunities and awards, that could be another part of your incentive strategy. So listing some awards that can boost their self-confidence and make them feel like they're making progress in their time with you. All right, so that was tip number 6 for helping you keep your team accountable and building team morale. Let's go to number 7. All right, so the next item for you to take a look at is, are you doing performance reviews? And this is another hot one that seems to get missed or forgotten or put on the wayside. And I'm telling you, I see my clients who are doing eight figures in sales. So if they could, a $20 million company also is guilty of forgoing the performance reviews as much as a startup company might, or even a solopreneur with a few, virtual assistants. So you want to schedule performance reviews with each of your team members. This is another piece that helps to keep everybody accountable and build team morale. They know that it's coming. And by the way, you should have this listed in that handbook that I spoke about on tip number 2, that they know they're getting a performance review, every quarter. And particularly if they want to get a raise, which, who doesn't, right? That is a big piece that I would put under the chapter on how to get a raise in your team handbook or your employee handbook. And the number 1 spot is, well, these are the things that we will consider. These are the factors that are important when considering a raise. So at the performance review, we're going to look at, and then you list your top 5 or 10 items that would put you over the edge to say, yes, this person, I definitely want to award them a raise because they truly have exceeded their role. Okay, so performance reviews are wonderful for being able to hold your team accountable. They know it's coming up. And in fact, I'd even go a step further. I would recommend put a copy of what that performance review looks like in your handbook so they know what it is that they're shooting for. It's a lot like, if you're an athlete going into a tournament, you want to know what you're being judged on. Or you're a musician going into a contest. So you get the idea. Nobody goes into a contest or competition and does not know what criteria, what factors the panel of judges are judging them on. What would constitute them getting the gold versus the silver and the bronze, okay, or any award. So make sure that you have that. And if you're unsure about that, I think this sounds like another episode all by itself, how to do a performance review. All right. So this is tip number 7 on how to keep your team accountable and build team morale. Tip number 8 would be project management tools. Use one. Okay. And so in your project, you want to have a project management tool that allows you to be able to see real time where each of your team members are in their projects, as far as updates, status updates, and so forth. And so this is a huge one. I can't tell you how many people of my private clients complain about the fact that their team, they have to babysit them. And they're so high maintenance. You have to go through and take so much time to extract information and have an entire meeting on project status updates. So this eliminates all that, right? I mean, you should still have meetings, but those meetings are going to be way shorter. This eliminates this whole high maintenance feeling of needing to extract this information because it should be right there. Now, on the checklist, I have suggested tools like Asana or Basecamp. There's Podio. But I'll tell you what, if you don't have one, the one that I've used a bunch of different ones, but the one I really like because it's so simple is just Google Drive, and having an Excel sheet that's set up for each of my team members have basically the same format of an Excel sheet. And they have their daily, their weekly, and their monthly projects and tasks, and anybody is able to see how things are going, status updates on how far along they are and maybe what new challenges that arise that they had to address and so forth. And so this is great for keeping your team accountable. You don't have to call them. You don't have to email them. You don't have to, sit down and have a meeting about how's it going with XYZ project, because wherever you are, you don't even have to be in the building. You could be in a different part of the country. You just, download the app on your iPhone, and at the touch of a button, you can take a look at where everybody's at. Okay, so that's a huge one. That alone by itself will double your accountability, or holding them accountable, I will tell you for sure. So that's tip number 8. Okay, so we're nearing the top 11 tip list that I'm sharing with you. So tip number 9 dovetails with 8. You need to address their project updates. Okay, so here's what happens. So you explain, in the handbook that everybody, needs to keep up with their updates, posting how far along they are with each task and so forth. But you also have to address that they are doing that contemporaneously. Okay, so they're updating it in real time. Now, I'm not talking about micromanaging as far as, something they don't need to jot something that took 10 minutes, right? But for the most part, throughout their day, they're going to be updating those key tasks that you're counting on them to be able to manage. But if they're not, you have to address and bring it up and say, oh, Jennifer, oh, Mark, I wanted to take a look at where you're at, and I noticed you didn't update anything. So can you make sure that you update this in real time so we can all see, where the project is flowing? And so for some people, it may take 3, 4, 5 reminders, believe it or not, but that's okay. It's to be expected. It's like a new thing. So, but if you have it in the handbook and you reviewed it with them, you verbally train them how to do this. And then the first couple of times, if they didn't do it, then you remind them. That's how everybody, figures out this is how the program works. And yes, they get into this new habit of updating their project sheets. Okay. And if they know that it's on their performance review, that they didn't have to be addressed multiple times, then hopefully they should be pretty self-motivated to get the memo the first time, right? So that is tip number 9 and holding your team accountable. Now let's move on to tip number 10. Okay, the weekly one-on-one. Here is another item that I find is a big one where people like to skip, okay? And so you can't expect to have their best performing teams, high performing teams, people performing at their best, if you're strictly managing them through email or through text and that sort of thing. So you do want to schedule a weekly one-on-one, and it doesn't have to be a long meeting. It could be 10 minutes. All right. I mean, ideally it'd be nice if it was more like 30, but you do want to have a weekly one-on-one with your team. So if it's a virtual team, I schedule mine, on a video conference call so we can see each other, we can share our screen on anything as far as documents. And of course, back when I had a team that reported all at the same facility, I would have the weekly one-on-one face-to-face. So this is a key important thing to have. And again, if you're not sure what to talk about, I think this will be another great topic for me to do a whole episode on. But today, I just want to give you a quick overview on the 11 elements that's going to help you build greater accountability and build greater team morale. All right, so we got the weekly one-on-one, and then of course, if you have more than one team member, you might have a staff of 3, of 10, maybe 25, maybe more, but you want to also bring them together and have recurring staff meetings. So this could be weekly, this could be bi-weekly, this could be monthly, it depends on the needs of your staff. as well as your needs. So if you have a virtual team, yes, you can absolutely have a staff meeting virtually where, all 8 people or all 12 people are joining, via conference call on video, or they can do it in person. So this is another piece that's going to hold them accountable, because at the staff meeting, they're going to have to share updates on what's happening from their side, right? What they're in charge of. And they don't certainly want to show up to a staff meeting ill prepared. And so that's another piece. It's built in to help keep everybody accountable to what they're in charge of. All right, so those are the 11 tips, and actually I want to give you, there's 2 bonus tips inside the checklist that I've created for you. This is the free download I'm offering you, and inside that checklist, I also share more on what I would call, I've dubbed it my T.G.I.F meeting format. So if you're a little bit confused on what should you talk about in your one-on-one meeting, or what should you talk about in your staff meeting, I have a T.G.I.F format for both of those meetings that's going to answer that question for you. So those bonus tips are inside there. In order to get that, all you have to do is text the word HPT download. HPT stands for high performing teams. So just text the word HPT download to the phone number 678-506-7543. And again, that number is 678-506-7543. So if you text the word HPT download, I'll send you that checklist straight to your inbox, and you can take a look at all 11 tips as well as the bonus TGIF meeting format. So I know we covered a lot in today's episode, and this is why I wanted to break this out for you, Morgan, in separate episodes, because I wanted to do more of a deep dive for each of your questions. So thanks for submitting that, Morgan. If you want to get future episodes delivered straight to your inbox, make sure you're subscribed to my email list at ParamountBusinessCoach.com. And if you'd like me to tackle your questions, you can record your question for me at ParamountBusinessCoach.com/AskYoon. Okay, so that's a wrap for today's episode. We covered 11 tips to help you keep your virtual team accountable and build morale. I trust that you got a lot of tips from today's episode, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.